Let me. Yeah. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the to Kabbalist Parsha study. We have Matot-Masei, which is Numbers 30, verse 2 to Numbers 36, verse 13. And so welcome. This is a double Parsha. Everybody is climbing in. This is fantastic. If you have any, if you'd like to dedicate your Torah study to anyone or anything in particular, please go ahead and drop it into the chat. Blessings. Yeah. No, I'm here today. I wouldn't. But I'm not going to be here next week or the week after that. Yeah. And here's from last year. There we go. So, Rabbi, why don't we have you do the bracha, and then I'll do a summary of this double parsha, and then after I do the summary, I'm going to talk briefly about oaths and vows and Kabbalistic perspectives on oaths and vows and what the sages have to say about oaths and vows. And then after about 25 minutes or so, I'll turn it over. We'll open it up, and we'll talk.
Yeah.
So, I love these dedications. Yeah, we have a lot of friends who are in the hospital right now as well. And I'd like to dedicate to all the sick out there and to all the infirmed out there, for sure. May they all have a speedy refuah shlema. So, Rabbi, why don't you take it away with
the bracha?
Amen. Amen. All right, so Matot-Masei. This is a double parsha, as I said. This parsha opens up with the laws of vows, of nederim, of neder and shavua, and a person's words have literally a binding metaphysical force. But at the same time, in this parsha, even though your words have binding metaphysical force, a father or husband can annul a woman's vow within the day that he hears it. Which is a little, okay. So we'll put a pin in that and get back to that later. For the most part, speech in the Torah is never just words. It's understood, really, that Kabbalistic thought is a creative in Kabbalistic. It's understood in Kabbalistic thought that the creative force echoing divine speech at creation. Speech is what created the world, the universe, ha'olam. The law implies human utterance carries real cosmic weight, requiring very careful handling, which is why there are all of these laws around it. And there's even an entire tractate devoted to it in the Talmud, Nedarim. So we're going to talk more about that later. So after this discussion about oaths and vows, Israel wages a devastating war of vengeance against Midian, guided by Pinchas, which is our very own OJ. And every Midianite male is killed, plus every non-virgin woman. It's a little bit interesting because Moses at this point becomes furious when he finds that the officers might be sparing the women and children, which seemingly contradicts, I would say, his own earlier restraint towards Midian, because his father-in-law, Yitro, is a Midianite. So I think Moses becomes furious because at that point Midian represents a very seductive power of idolatry and essentially must be uprooted in its entirety, according to Moses. So then there's discussion about how the spoils of war are to be divided and how they're divided amongst the people and what their shares are. And then Reuben and Gad, joined by half of the tribe of Manasseh, request land east of the Jordan and outside the borders of Israel proper. Now, we talked about that a lot last year, and I'm going to put last year's Parsha in the chat there. That's right. That's right. We have abracadabra. This is the abracadabra. May the words that I speak come back to me. So Reuben and Gad are joined by Manasseh, and they request land east of Jordan. And Moses initially rebukes them, comparing them to spies. But then he ultimately agrees on the condition that they fight alongside their brothers first, that they're the first to take up arms, and that they're the first to do it. And we talked a lot about that last year. So please watch our prior video on this topic. Okay, so then we move on to Parsha-Masei. And the Masei famously lists the 42 encampments of the 40-year wilderness journey. And most Kabbalists, well, particularly the Arizal, Isaac Luria, treat this as far more than just geography. The 42 stops correspond to a level of spiritual descent and ascent that are mirrored in the 42-letter name of God, in the Anabakoach, and the soul's journey through life and even through death, actually. The Parsha then closes with the laws of the cities of refuge for accidental manslaughter, which is tied to the death of the Kohen Gadol. And that's a summary of both of those parshiot. Yeah.
Parsha, right.
Yeah. So let's talk about what Matot actually says about vows, because this thing about vows and nullifying women's vows, which I don't really care for, but all right, doesn't seem very equal, but no surprise there. But Matot opens with a very unusual address. Moses speaks. Generally, when Moses speaks, it's to the whole of Israel. It's to everybody. But in this one, it starts off that he speaks El Rashi Ha-Matot, to the heads of the tribes specifically. That's what Matot means, like tribes. Rashi's head, right? And this is in Numbers 30, verse 2. And the sages note that this is one of the few laws that's delivered through tribal leadership rather than directly to the nation. And this is a signal that the vows are a matter of communal seriousness, not private whim. Okay? The core verse, which is Ishki Yidor Neder, Lo Yachel Devaro, right? If a man vows a vow, he shall not profane his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds from his mouth. Now, let's talk about that for a second. The mouth is a portal. It's a gateway. The phrase is ha-yotzi mepiv, which means the words that go out from his mouth. Not the words that he intended, not the words that he thought, but it's the speech. Once it exits the mouth, it becomes literally operative and spiritual fact. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But the mouth is a portal. It's a portal, for the most part, that should stay closed. So keep your portal shut, for the most part. The two Hebrew words that are used for vows or that are sometimes conflated and are not really interchangeable are neder and shavua. Now, neder is a vow that prohibits an object to oneself. In other words, this bread is forbidden to me. Okay, that's a neder. Shavua is an oath that obligates a person, meaning I swear that I will or will not do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so that's what we normally think of as a vow or an oath. But neder is a vow that, like I said, prohibits an object to oneself. And these are very confusing, but the Mishnah, Nedarim 2b, spends an enormous amount of energy trying to distinguish these two different vows, subcategories of vows and oaths, because they work entirely through different legal mechanisms. A neder creates literally a localized sanctity or holiness, a prohibition on the object. And the shavua binds the person directly, more like a personal contract with God. If I don't do this, something bad is going to happen to me. Okay? Or if I do this, something bad is going to happen. So let's talk a little bit about why these vows are treated so differently, and they're not neutral. They're treated as very dangerous. Like I said, such as they have a tractate of their own in the Talmud. So in Ecclesiastes 5:4, it says it's better that you should not vow than you should vow and not pay. And I would say that this phrase becomes the guiding anxiety of the entire rabbinic vow literature. Vows are not encouraged. They are essentially tolerated and tightly managed. And I came upon this because I studied all of the different, in preparation for tonight, I studied all the different Kabbalistic sages, and some non-Kabbalistic sages too, like Maimonides, to think about stuff and present some good material for you tonight. So Talmud Nedarim 22a goes further. Whoever vows is as if he built a bama, forbidden altar, in a time when private altars were prohibited. This frames vowing as a dangerous, almost quasi-idolatrous overreach. And it creates new categories of things that are permitted and things that are forbidden. Okay? So because of this, the fact that vows are so dangerous, they are fully legislated, which is my great cousin Joseph Caro took great care to codify. Let's talk a little bit about the various Kabbalistic sages, like good old Joseph Caro. First, let's talk about Nachmanides. Okay, Nachmanides viewed vows as essentially a cosmic act, a huge cosmic act. He treats speech very different than the rationalists like Maimonides. Nachmanides, for Ramban, right? Human speech is an echo of divine speech of creation itself. And God spoke, and it was. All right? Vows specifically, Ramban's school treats the neder as actually changing the metaphysical status of the object itself. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of it here because it was so complicated, it kind of blew my mind. But it was essentially, I will distill it down to the fact that a vow metaphysically changes the status of that statement and the object in that statement. Okay, so let's talk about Caro. So Caro, as you all know, made the great codification of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, and he says that uh, vows. He talks about categorizing vows and the process of nullifying vows, which require, like, if you need to be released from a vow, then you need to have a panel of three or some sort of scholar. There is a process for nullifying vows, which I think is very interesting because it's what's worth contemplating is that this is a guy who wrote Magid Mesharim. Magid Mesharim is a book or a text that describes mystical visitations from a Magid, a Magid heavenly mentor, who reportedly spoke through his own mouth while he was in an altered state, right? Speaking in tongues. So it's worth noting that the person who wrote the most dry, oh my God, it was so hard to read, the most dry and procedural codification of vow law. You can imagine, this is so boring. He also, this one same dude, believed that his own mouth could become a vessel for supernatural voice. That's like a contradictory pow for me. So, let's say that let's talk about the Maharal, right? The Judah Ben Lo, the Maharal of Prague.
The goal.
The Maharal of Prague, his vow was that speech was not merely a legal act, but it was performed because it was most distinctly human. Speech is essentially one of the most godlike faculties that's possessed by a person. And this is why breaking a vow carries so much gravity. It's not just breaking a promise, it's a corruption of the very faculty that marks us as created in God's image. Okay, that's what the Judah Ben Lo might say. And let's talk about vows just in Kabbalistic thought, okay? In the Kabbalah in general. We know that according to Sefer Yetzirah, that's the foundational text of mystical Jewish cosmology, right? It describes creation itself as occurring through the combinations of the 22 Hebrew letters. These are the building blocks of speech, and the building blocks of speech are treated as literal building blocks of the universe itself. So a person who forms words, okay, is capable of wielding the same raw material that God uses during creation, because it's God. And God said, "Let there be light," or "Let there be this." It's a God said. It's an act of speech. So, as I said before, the mouth is understood to be a Kabbalistic gateway, the path, the mouth is figured literally as a doorway between the inner world of thought, okay, which is associated with higher and less materialized sephirot, and the outer world of action. Once it passes through that gate, that mouth, that then it becomes real, and it becomes formable and shapeable. Okay, so there is a famous teaching that is echoed in Hasidic sources that holds that spoken words create angels. Positive words create positive spiritual forces that continue to exist in and act in the world. Okay, and regardless of what you do next, they're still acting. So the goodness that you put it into the world continues on, right? Careless and cruel and false words, Lashon Hara, creates destructive forces like Mezikim, demons even, okay? And they take on an independent existence. So, let's see. I have a question about vows and I'm going to put it to the rabbi because I don't understand with all of this importance around vows and how vows can be nullified and can you nullify your wife's vow and nullifying this. It seems like there's this weird thing that happens with Kol Nidre. Kol Nidre, for those that don't know, is a holiday. It's the holiest night of the year, and it during that night vows can be nullified. So how is it, Rabbi, that vows can be both actually the holiness of your words are holy, yet at the same time we can wipe them out, we can wipe the slate clean on this one night?
Well, actually, it's not just on that one night. Nadarim. You can, if you've made a vow, you can convene a bet din. It so happened when I was in yeshiva that somebody made actually a shavua and they wanted to get out of it, or a netter, and you convene a bet din now on during
A
the
bet din is they tell everybody what a bet din is.
a rabbinical court, three people.
A court.
A rabbinical court, yeah, three people. But the thing is that you cannot, if you're going to make the vow, then they have to ask, well, if you knew that this vow was going to result, if that A was going to result in B, would you have still made the vow? And there are ways. Now, that being said, you can't just be mavatal or negate a vow or shavua. This comes under shmirat halashon, which is guarding your tongue. Making a vow is a very significant thing. A nazir, as you alluded to earlier, the difference between a neder and a shavua. A nazir who is going to abstain from yayin, from wine, he has to bring a chatat. He has to bring a sin offering.
A sin offering.
Right, exactly. Even though he's doing it L'Shem Shemayim, or he wants to whatever he's doing. All right, without getting into the motivation, the bottom line is, even though what he's doing for the purpose of making a Aliyah Baruchnia, to go spiritually elevate himself. The bottom line is the very fact that because he makes that netter, that he's going to abstain from wine, he has to bring a chatat. He has to bring a sin offering because he's arbitrarily deciding to do something more than what the Torah requires and abstain from something that's permissible. And by virtue of the fact that he's you know, making that commitment, even if it's for a good purpose, he's still. So the idea is that people misconstrue, I think, Kol Nidre, that, oh, well, then, oh, you don't have to keep your word, you don't have to keep a vow. No, I mean, quite frankly, a vow is a very, very important thing, and you have to, that's why we even say beli shavua or beli netter. Beli netter, you say something,
Yeah, beli netter, right?
Without a promise,
Without a
someone says,
promise, right?
David, can you do this for me? Rabbi McLashley, can you do this for me? And even I intend to do it, I should still say beli netter, because a netter binds.
Well, isn't it if you do it 3 times, then it becomes and then becomes an expectation.
That's what they call a chazaka. 3 times.
So explain that for everybody. If you do something
a momentum, you do it 3 times, it's like the thing is established.
So, like, let's say I go and I visit my parents every Shabbat for 3 Shabbats in a row.
That's a chazaka.
All right. On the 4th Shabbat, they have an expectation that I'm going to come, even though it's unspoken, and I have an expectation to be there, even though it's unspoken. And I never said I'm going to spend every Shabbat with you, right?
Right. That's
okay. So you have to be careful that this is the kind of craziness that we go through to avoid making promises that we can't keep.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Because a netter, well, of course, a shavua is even more stringent than a netter, but that's an oath. But anyway, what I wanted to mention is alluding to something that you mentioned earlier concerning about duality, is that the name of the Parsha itself. I was thinking to myself, in this Parsha, it talks about this is where the Are Miklat, the cities of refuge, are designated.
Hmm.
I was going to talk about that because that's really fascinating, but then I thought, this is where the city of refuge, if someone is a rotzeach, is a murderer. But they committed the murder accidentally, what we call in Hebrew b'shogeg. They did it unintentionally,
Yeah, right, right,
not
right.
accidentally. Accidentally is actually oines, but they do it by inadvertently. Is that's the word I'm looking for? They do it inadvertently.
Right, you accidentally cause someone's
Exactly.
death, right? Like
Exactly.
you're walking along and someone throws a baseball at you, and you turn to catch the baseball because you see it's a line drive coming right
Right.
at you. As you do that, your butt sticks out, you hit a guy standing next to you, and he falls into a river and drowns. It's
Right.
totally an accident.
Well, that Inus is more like an act of God. It's an act of God. It's a what they call an act of God. An example of an Inus: I'm playing golf with someone. I hand him a golf club, and
Sure.
out in the golf field, and he acts as a lightning rod and a bolt of lightning.
Bolt of lightning comes down and hits him. Right, perfect. And you
I
handed
handed
him
him the golf club. How
you
did I know
handed
it?
him the
Well,
golf
that's
club.
Inus.
Perfect.
Shogeg is something where it's unintentional. Let's say, for example, I don't know, I make a toaster for someone and I don't follow safety protocols. And as a result of that, the person gets electrocuted. Chas v'shalom. It's not that I intended to electrocute the person. It's not that I did anything with that, in mind, but my negligence or
You were
my
negligent, right? You didn't
exactly
follow
my
the rules of
negligence contributed to it.
electricity. Yeah.
That's shogeg. And when it's shogeg, you can go to the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge. There was six, I believe, appointed and designated. It's in this week's Parsha. And you would go there to escape the Goel Adam, the blood avenger. And when I was in yeshiva, this is in Seder Nezikin, the
And
we have
who's the blood avenger? Who is the blood avenger?
the blood avenger is the relative of the person who got killed.
Okay, so you would go to the city of refuge in order to escape anybody giving you retribution.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
somebody accidentally killed my brother. I mean, I'm going to want to go after his stuchas, right? And so the thing is that this is he goes to the Ira Miklat.
But we shouldn't have to have that because shouldn't the blood avenger show restraint?
Well, it's in the Torah. Lo sikom, lo sitor, right? Not to lo sikom, not to bear revenge, take revenge.
Yeah.
Lo sitor, not to bear a grudge.
So
Because
why do we have to have these cities of refuge?
because human nature, it takes into consideration human nature that when you have
Mm,
someone, your son or your brother or your father or someone, a member of your mishpacha, someone that you're really close to, you have a son, and okay, fine, it's unintentional. That doesn't bring my son back. So the idea is the Torah acknowledges human nature
yeah.
that people are going to be ticked off.
Right.
They're gonna be seriously pissed. The Torah says, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to give this." That's where you have the Ari Mikla, and they have in the types of damages. I remember was in Makot in Baba Kama. They mention all the different types of damages. The short
Damages.
bore, Mabai Hever, and then they subcategorize it. Behita, Revita. Anyway, without going into all that, the types of damages done, and then you have also the situation of the Adam Zomamim, which are false witnesses that they say they saw someone kill the person intentionally. Then the Adam Zomamim can actually be Chayav Misa. They can actually get whatever punishment they were trying, that was intended for the person gets done to them instead.
Oh
Like
yes,
if
that's
I
right.
falsely accuse you of murder, and it comes out that I'm, what with the Adam Zomim, I have somebody. Hey, let me get a friend of mine together, and let's accuse Esther Tiferet of some. And she's totally innocent. So it comes out she's totally innocent. I did. They say, hey, you know what? Then what you were trying to have done is it gets done to you. That's the thing of the Ari Mikla. But what I want to mention is this is interesting, and this was inspired by something I read with Chabad. It's Eliezer Shem Tov actually wrote this, but I expounded on it. I looked at it and I said, that's a brilliant chiddush or a brilliant insight on the very Parsha, Matot-Masei. Because you look at it, a question we have today, a lot of things are changing so rapidly. And I think everyone out here could say, we often ask ourselves, it says in Pirkei Avot, Ezahu Ashir, who's the wealthy person, Ashir, right? Ezahu Ashir, Somech Bechalko, the person who's happy with their lot, content with their lot. Now, it's very, very important to distinguish between contentment and complacency. Contentment is not complacency. I can have Hakar Tov. I can be Makar Tov. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Abishter, has given me plenty of brachas, given me a wonderful wife, given me a wonderful things, given me Baruch Hashem, I'm 70, I'm in good health. These are all, B'liyah and Hara. But the thing that is I can say, yeah, sure, I can be grateful for these things. And I could say, oh, I set aside some time. I have time to set aside to learn this, that, plenty of things to be grateful for. So, Samech V'chelko. You say, thank you, Hashem. Thank you for what you've given me. But that doesn't, being Samech V'chelko does not translate to complacency. Doesn't mean, oh, there isn't more to accomplish. There isn't more to do. Or as my wife says, you're all that in a bag of chips to say, hey, I can just sit back on my haunches. I've done my part. No, there's always more to do. There's always, and one of the things that we often ask about, should I be content with my situation or should I never be satisfied? And really, it has to be a balance between the two. It has to be a balance between the two. And what's really interesting is you find that in this week's Parsha. The very name of the Parsha, Matot-Masei. Matot is tribes. Another word for tribes is Shvatim. And Masei is the journeys, which is the 42 journeys that Am Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael took on their journey right to Eretz HaKodesh. So leaving the content aside, the names of these two names are striking in that they represent a contrast, and I'll tell you why. The Torah uses two words for tribe: mata, or the plural is matot. Another word is shvatim, the 12 shvatim, right? The 12 tribes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but these words can also mean branch. There's a whole bunch of different words in Hebrew for branch. To designate staff. I can give you all the different words for branch, but the word here they use, there's two words, mata and shevet, okay? And they both mean branch. What is the difference? A shevet is a branch still connected to the to the tree. It's still connected to the tree, okay? It's still connected to the tree, okay? So that means, or it can be freshly cut. It still possesses flexibility. It's not dried out. It's not desiccated. Excuse me. Okay. It's not desiccated. A mata is a branch that has been detached, dried out, and hardened. It's desiccated. It's dried out where it the sap and everything else like that. It's dead wood. Okay. So isn't it strange that you pair these two names? Look at this, Matot to Masei. Matot, as I referred to, is the branch. A branch is something that's immobile. It's stationary. It's attached to the tree. Okay. It's attached to the tree. A shevet is a branch still connected to the tree, but a mata is a branch that has been detached. It's dried out. It's hardened. It's not going anywhere, right? The sap isn't flowing through it anymore. It's dead wood. So
Right.
isn't it interesting then that you pair the name Mata and Masei? Masei is journeys. What are journeys? You're moving. You're progressing. You're going somewhere. You're getting it done. You're getting it done. It indicates movement, right? So there's a contrast here. One, Mata suggests rigidity and rootedness, right? Rigidity and rootedness, that it's not going anywhere. You're rooted. And the other one suggests constant movement, Masei, which is the journeys, right? The 42 journeys. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a key to this question. There's no contradiction between stability and movement. We think of stability and movement as being mutually exclusive, when in fact, stability and movement are not mutually exclusive. Actually, they can work synergistically with each other, as I like to say, where the total becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And I'll expound on that in a second. But genuine growth is only possible, really, when it's rooted in stability. Okay? You uproot the tree, the etz we were using, right? The shoresh, the root. You uproot a tree, what happens? It dries out. The sap it stops flowing. You remove yourself from your roots, and there is no progress. There is no growth. There's nothing. So constant movement without roots, without a shoresh, without a root, doesn't produce stability or real growth. So the apparent conflict arises when people feel they must choose between who they are and the changing values of the world around us. Because we're constantly inundated. Uh, you know, to be progressive, to be modern, to change, to keep up with the latest trends, the latest this, the latest that. Okay, and in fact, if we do that without being connected with who we are, where we came from, our core value, okay, it's like that tree. You uproot the tree, the branch dries out, it's dead. So the question that people ask is, do I hang on to traditions from the past? Or do I hang on to these traditions? Do I move with the current of the present? Okay, it's something that people wrestle with.
Yeah, so that's a big wrestling question.
What is that
Absolutely.
really?
I
But
mean,
but but it's not really much of a choice
I
because
would, I would like to add something to that
go ahead,
actually.
go
So
ahead.
you're already like, hitting the nail on the head with
Mhm.
the theme of the name of the Parsha, but then even within the Parsha, I find it's represented with something that I'm not sure a lot of people would pick up on, but Reuben and Gad, the tribes that stay on the closer side of the Jordan. I've
Mhm.
yeah.
heard that some mystical commentators will say that this represents the soul's pull to the material life, and eventually Moses, and by extension God's word through Moses, concedes that they can stay as long as they continue to serve the community by helping in the battle, right? So when we look at that, we see that they are able to engage with what might be considered a metaphor for more worldly existence,
Mhm.
not going straight into the Holy Land, but continuing to, tend to their flock and their crops in this, preferable material land. But they're still able to engage fully with the people and the family that brought them there. So at
Mhm.
once they're severed and connected.
Great. Yeah.
And that severance, it comes with some growing pains, of course, because they have to argue with Moshe Rabbeinu in order to
A lot
get
of
there.
growing pains there.
But
Yeah.
you're right, though. It's right there in the title, and then you look in, and it's all the same.
And what's interesting to ferret, I'll mention that there's an interesting parallel with this in halacha. A duck, D-U-C-K, a duck. In Jewish law, under the laws of kashrut, you cannot eat an animal like nevela. Doctor, between nevela, an animal that died. And the question is, a duck. Let's say, for example, if a duck there's a question as to its health. Is the duck kosher or not? Let's say, for example, uh, if the duck is injured or in some way physically
Mm.
compromised, how do you check it? How do you check to see if the duck is kosher? Well, if it can walk a certain distance without ostensible difficulty, we can make the assumption that, hey, look, the duck is walking. He doesn't seem to be staggering. He doesn't seem to be stumbling. So Mamela, the duck must be okay. The duck is kosher. Okay, therefore the duck is kosher. Another way, however, an additional option, if you're still not sure, is you put it in a river. put it in a river. If it swims against the current,
Mm.
the duck is in good shape, right? He's swimming against the current. But it's
Yeah.
also kosher if he swims with the current. If he swims with the current, the duck is also kosher. But you're saying, well, wait a minute. Maybe the current's just dragging him along, right?
Right. Maybe he's sick.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right. Maybe the current is just dragging him along. How's that a simon nick or an identifiable sign? How is that a simon that the duck is okay? So what you do is it's only it's only provided that you put a stick alongside it, a stick. If the duck is swimming faster than the stick, then you can assume that the duck is moving along on his own power. In other words, he's not being dragged along with the current. If he's moving faster than the stick in the river, that means he's propelling himself. And it's not merely being carried by an external force, but it's generating its own movement. It's moving under its own power. And that's the point. You know, the true sign of
That's
progress.
news to me. This is you blew my mind, and I just put out my little booklet on the synonym of birds, right?
Right. Oh, an oif, right, a bird. So so the true sign of progress is when you can move under your own power. Movement by external currents is more of a symptom of personal stagnation. That's complacency. When you're just being dragged along by the flavor of the month or whatever the current trend is, and you're just being dragged along in that direction, that's not progress. Progress is Lafum Sa'ara Agra, according to the labor is the reward. When you're putting in your own hishtadlet, your own amelet, you're moving forward under your own power instead of just going along with whatever's hip, cool, or trendy for the moment. You're just being dragged along and saying, "Oh, well, I want to do what's hip, cool, and trendy." So I see Madonna doing it, or I see Taylor Swift doing it, and nothing against either person. Don't know either one of them, but the point is, if you're just doing it because they're doing it, you're not doing that. That's not.
So is a duck going with the current still kosher?
The duck is only kosher if it's going with the current. You put a stick next to it, and if it's moving faster than the stick, that means it's moving. That
Okay,
means
of
it's
its own
moving under its
volition.
own power. So
Got it.
if the duck
Got
is
it.
moving under its own power, it's considered kosher.
Okay.
And that's the thing. If it's moving under its own power, it's considered kosher. The
Okay.
key thing there, what I'm bringing about the duck is that like I said, just going along with the current, and I'm talking about social currents or social trends, just going along with, like I said, whatever's cool or trendy, whatever's cool or trendy for the moment, does not indicate true progress. True progress is when you're doing it under your own power, and you're putting in your own effort. Just doing what everybody else around you is doing, which is the social current, doing what everyone else around you is doing can be indicative of personal stagnation because you don't have to put in any of your effort. You can just say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go along with the crowd.
All right. That's a good lesson.
You got to stay kicking, screaming optional, and it doesn't matter what direction.
Right. It's the point is that what we have to do is we have to put in our own effort, our own power, our own koach, our own, our own power, our own strength to just follow along with the current. So anyway, that was the thing that you can see just in the very title of this double parsha. You can see that that lesson there because you have the idea of a dry, desiccated branch, uh, you know, and it's attached to a tree. All right. Uh, this indicates this indicates a lack of movement. This indicates stability, right? Stability. It's stable. And then it's compared with Masei, the journeys, traveling, where you're going. The idea of stability versus movement. But really, you can only move forward when you have a stable foundation on which to move. You have to plant one foot in front of the other. You have to make sure, if you do mountain climbing, all right, you don't want to give up your position. You're in an unstable position. You don't want to make a move uh, just do guesswork and make a move until you have a stable, firm footing, and then you're able to make progress. So the idea is that true progress can only be made from a stable foundation. We have to know who we are, what we are. We have to have our core values defined in order to make genuine progress. Otherwise, we're just going to go kaplop, fall on our toughest, and go, "Hey, Gewalt, what happened?"
All right. Interesting. Do we have any other questions?
I have one, but it might be a little bit of a heavy one. It's just part of the Parsha that we haven't addressed already, and maybe you can address it in under 14 minutes if you want to. But I want to point out that in the Parsha, it's kind of like last week where there's some difficult material, and maybe just by saying that, you already know I'm talking about the cruelty shown of the Midianites. So I was wondering if there was any commentary that you had locked and loaded on that.
Well, why don't you go ahead and explain to everybody what the issue is?
Sure. So it's essentially saying within the Parsha that God itself is telling these people to go out to this land and as revenge for what took place in the previous Parsha with Pinchas. These people were allegedly tempting the people of Israel, and then a zealot named Pinchas comes through and skewers a couple of them right in front of everybody. And last week we spent a lot of the Parsha discussing how that can be justified, that extrajudicial killing. And then we get to this Parsha, and there's even more of it.
There's even more.
Just go ahead and finish the job. So, is there anything that we have already?
Well, the only answer that I have, and I alluded to it earlier, was that like I said, it was a little bit weird that Moses is like, "Didn't you kill everybody like I told you to?" And I don't really understand why he's behaving like that, particular when, like I said earlier, he showed restraint because his father-in-law was a Midianite, and now they're going whole hog on these people, really. My only response was that I can find is that they are such a threat because of their idolatrous ways that they would lead to such temptation that they need to be wiped out.
Right. I, after last Parsha too, actually learned something, and I think it could give a little bit of insight on both this Parsha and the last one. So,
let's hear it.
Already, so stop me if you did. But the word Midian in Hebrew it could be etymologically linked in meaning to the word Madon, which means strife. So a lot of people have taken that to mean that even if we're just going to choose to overlook, the literal violence that's described, we can take it to a figurative level and assume that Midian represents the element of, the psyche that pushes us away from holy obligation, or at least, being a good, untempted person. So it turns this, apparent war crime into an internal struggle with both the parts of ourselves that wish to do better and wish to earn our place in, the Holy Land, figuratively, if you wanted to make that into the world to come, maybe you could, versus the part of ourselves that wants to stay exactly as we are and to conform, like Rabbi McLashley was describing earlier, to the currents around us, to essentially, surrender to the ways that are taking place in our surroundings.
Right. So that's it.
It's strange that you could get a positive message out of such a brutal piece of scripture. But
Yeah,
I
I mean, Esther
one
brings up a
thing.
good point because that's all I'm saying is that it's not only know thyself, it's be true to thyself, to know who you are. You know, if you're just doing something because it's hip or trendy, it doesn't show any personal growth or personal development. You know, you have to have a foundation of knowing who you are, what you are, a stable foundation in order to make genuine progress. Um, like I said, anyone who's gone mountain climbing knows that they have to have a stable position before they can really make progress to that next, take that next step. I mean, if they're doing it and they're not stable, you know, they're going to go kaplop. So you know, the idea is that we have this idea. Oh, you know, for the sake of progress, out with the old, in with the new, and that's not a valid concept because where you came from defines who you are. Your own unique traditions, ideals, values, whatever they are, you know, that defines who you are. They have to be embraced. They provide you the stability, the yesod, the foundation to make genuine progress.
I would dare say that you could actually find sort of a middle path sort of messaging throughout the parsha when we look at it this way, because we talk about being connected or severed to the main body, and
Mm-hmm.
we are interpreting the war on the Midianites or the execution thereof as an internal struggle, and then we can go back to Reuben and God again,
Mm-hmm.
God with an A, not with an O,
Right,
and
right, right.
and we can look at that, and it's like to say you can be on this side of the river or this side, or you can go all in on committing yourself, or you can stick to the life that you prefer, but you must keep fighting no matter what. You must keep
Right.
fighting.
That's it.
You
And
have
you
to
can't
follow
give
your
up.
obligation, you
You
have to
can't
stay
give up the battle.
committed, but the rest is optional. Keep kicking.
Right.
It doesn't matter what direction.
Exactly. It says it in Pirkei Avot, "V'al atzmach ad yom motcha." Don't trust yourself into the day of your death. You shouldn't say, "Hey, you know, I've arrived. I've got it. I've got it covered. I'm not worried. You know, I'm on stable ground. Ain't ain't nothing gonna bring me down." But don't trust yourself into the day of your death because you don't know what could bring you down.
Blessed is the one who has brought us to the same conclusion as the sages.
Right. So always, you know, just be mindful of where you're coming from and where you're going to. They work together.
Ava Shaw points out exactly, summarizes exactly with you're not obligated to complete the work, nor are you free to
To
desist from.
abstain from it. Right.
That's
Also
right.
from Pirkei Avot. Right.
Yeah, that's a great place. That's a great bit of wisdom on which I think we should end tonight's parsha. Actually, that's a great concluding point, which is that you're not obligated to complete the work, but you're not free to abstain from it either. So you got to keep working.
Well,
Um,
in conclusion, they always ask to dedicate your Torah learning. So I want to dedicate retroactively, what we'd call limafreya. I want to dedicate retroactively to Lolan, to Aziza White, to my good friend Faith McCann, Ava Shaw, Lolan, Mark Gilmore, all the wonderful people that come up and give these very insightful comments. I wish I could read every one of them. Mark Gilmore. I wish I could read every one of them and give them Ezra Abram. You know, give them. You know, of course we can't do that because we'd be going on 5 hours. But I read these comments. I read every single one of them after we've concluded, and I go over them. And I learn so much from them. So I want to dedicate my Torah learning to all the wonder Courtney Wake. Always Courtney. She's always all of these wonderful people. Keenan, all of them. Mark Gilmore. You know, I want to dedicate the Torah learning to them because
that's very nice.
without them, I mean, you know,
Yeah,
we appreciate all of them, and it's very important. You know.
Well, thank you very
Walton
much.
too,
Tomorrow night we
Mr.
have
Walton. Yeah, thank you.
tomorrow night we have Ma'ariv services at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Please join us tomorrow night. I'll be there, and then I'm taking stepping a little bit of away for a little break while Chazanit Esther Tiferet and Rabbi David McLashley take over Parsha for a couple of weeks, for 2 weeks while I'm away. And I'll be back. I'm testing out all my theories on ornithomancy, and bird simonim. I'll do a lot of bird watching while I'm out in the Galapagos. So I want to thank everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and Lila Tov.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.